The moment Elina tapped the space bar on Jerry's laptop, the room felt different. Oregon's gentle morning glow brushed against the windows, but her eyes didn't move from the screen. Right there, in the middle of the desktop, sat a single folder with a name that didn't belong in an ordinary marriage. Second Life. Her stomach tightened. Her breath slowed. Her hand hovered above the trackpad as if touching it might change everything she believed about her husband. She whispered, barely audible, "Jerry, what did you do?" That question wasn't filled with rage. No, it carried a truth deeper than anger, the kind of truth a woman feels when her spirit knows she's standing at the edge of something she never asked to see. Before she opened the folder, have you ever trusted someone so deeply that it never crossed your mind they could be living an entirely different life behind your back? Because Elina wasn't suspicious. She wasn't paranoid. She was simply a wife who had handed her billionaire husband $52,000, her life savings, believing it would help build their future. But as that folder stared back at her, she realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a doorway into a reality Jerry never prepared her for. Elina trusted her husband with everything she had. But what she found inside that laptop wasn't just unexpected. It exposed choices Jerry made long before she ever placed that envelope in his hands. A beat passes. Before we go further, tell me something. Do you think she should have opened that laptop? Do you believe trust has limits? Comment your thoughts. I want to hear from you. Just as Elina gathers the courage to click the folder, the quiet in the apartment breaks. A key turns in the lock. Jerry walks in unexpectedly. Her heart flips. She snaps the laptop shut so fast the sound echoes across the dining table. Jerry stops in the doorway, eyes narrowing as he senses something is off. "Elina," his voice is low, deliberate. "We need to talk tonight." The tension doesn't shout, it tightens. Not loud, but unmistakable. Something is coming. Before we go deeper, please like this video and comment below. Helps YouTube push this story to more amazing listeners like you. And if you're new, welcome. Subscribe for more storytelling that speaks to the soul. Welcome to Mr. Michael Stories Hub, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. The Oregon morning didn't try to impress anyone. It didn't shout for attention or paint the sky with dramatic colors. It simply existed in its quiet, steady way. Mist brushing lightly against the apartment windows, the faint scent of pine drifting through the air, and the gentle whisper of the Columbia River settling somewhere in the distance. Elina loved mornings like this. They matched the rhythm of her spirit. Calm, reflective, intentional. Before life grew busy, before decisions demanded answers, before emotions rose to the surface, she always took a moment to breathe in this stillness. Oregon had become a refuge for her in ways she didn't expect. when she first moved from the East Coast. Her East Coast upbringing was full of color, laughter, and movement. She grew up around neighbors who treated each other like extended family, aunties who could read your whole life through one raised eyebrow, and cousins who turned even the smallest gathering into an event. There were cookouts where the smoke scented the streets, conversations where everyone spoke at once, and church Sundays that felt like celebrations of survival and community. Those roots shaped her deeply. They taught her to feel, to observe, to protect her peace, and to trust her intuition. Oregon was the opposite, yet beautiful in its own right. It taught her to slow down, to appreciate quiet corners of life, to listen to her thoughts without interruption. Here, people apologized even when you bumped into them. Farmers markets stretched out like curated displays of local pride, and communities had their own gentle rhythm. Elina learned to exist between both worlds, the vibrant foundation that raised her and the peaceful landscape that softened her edges. Somewhere between those two worlds stood her husband, Jerry. From the moment they met, their connection felt natural. Jerry had an unassuming calmness, a man who didn't need to announce his presence or wealth. She hadn't known he was a billionaire when they met, and honestly, she didn't care. What struck her first was the ease in his smile, the kindness in his eyes, and the unusual charm of a man confident enough to demonstrate Kayla massaging techniques in a grocery store without shame. His simplicity disarmed her. His tenderness surprised her. His effort won her. Their relationship blended more than cultures. It blended lifestyles, expectations, and faith. Jerry introduced her to hiking trails she had no business climbing, while she introduced him to flavors he didn't know existed before tasting her sweet potato pie. She brought him into her world of laughter-filled cookouts where uncles judged grilled meat like professionals. He brought her into quiet vineyards where conversations stretched softly into the evening. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it worked because both of them made room for each other's backgrounds. Jerry admired her strength, her warmth, and the way she navigated life with grace. Elina admired his discipline, his intentional habits, and the quiet confidence he carried. Together, they created a life where both worlds could breathe. But even in peaceful marriages, silence can hold unanswered questions. Elina began noticing small things long before the laptop incident. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, just subtle shifts. Sometimes Jerry paused a moment, too long, before answering harmless questions. Sometimes his eyes flickered with thoughts he didn't voice. Sometimes he felt present, but distant, like his mind held a room she wasn't allowed to enter. She didn't assume the worst. She wasn't raised to jump to conclusions. But intuition, especially a woman's intuition combined with years of cultural wisdom, is rarely wrong. Something inside her registered that Jerry's life contained more than he allowed her to see. Still, she trusted him. She believed in their connection. She believed in transparency, and believed he believed in it too. Yet on quiet Oregon mornings like this, when mist covered the world and her thoughts found room to move, she felt the faint truth beneath it all. Jerry loved her deeply. But Jerry was hiding something. Not loudly, not carelessly, but intentionally. And one day soon, that hidden truth would find its way into the light. The envelope sat on the dining table for 3 days before Elina finally handed it to Jerry. She didn't rush the moment. Money held meaning for her. Not just financial value, but emotional weight, years of discipline, and prayers whispered on nights when her dreams felt bigger than her circumstances. The $52,000 inside that envelope wasn't inheritance, luck, or gift money. It was every hour she'd worked overtime, every expense she delayed, every sacrifice she made to build a future she could stand on. Her grandmother used to say, "Baby, money you earn with sweat stays loyal to you because it knows how hard you worked for it." Elina carried that belief in her bones. That was why she didn't play with her savings. Not ever. But marriage meant partnership, and partnership meant trust. So when Jerry presented the idea of a low-risk opportunity he believed would double her savings, she didn't immediately say yes. She asked questions. She watched his face closely, searching for anything out of place. But Jerry spoke calmly, explaining things without pressure, without manipulation. He wasn't a fast-talking man by nature. His assurance came in quiet certainty, not flashy persuasion. "I wouldn't suggest anything that could jeopardize what you've built," he told her one evening, sitting across from her with that steady, thoughtful gaze she'd grown to love. "Your savings matter to you, and they matter to me. Let me help them grow." Elina had never been reckless, but she had married a man she respected, a man whose decisions were usually grounded, careful, and wise. If she could trust him with her heart, her home, her future, then surely she could trust him with this. So on a peaceful Saturday morning, she picked up the envelope, smoothed the edges with her palm, and walked it over to him. "Are you sure this is the right time to invest?" she asked softly, watching his reaction more than listening to his answer. Jerry smiled, gentle and reassuring. "Absolutely. I'll make sure it grows." She handed him the envelope, not because she understood the investment fully, but because she believed in the man standing before her. But the moment the envelope left her hand, something subtle shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Jerry didn't turn robot-like or disappear into some suspicious routine. It was smaller than that, the kind of shift you only notice when your spirit is paying attention. For instance, that afternoon, he stepped outside to take a phone call, which wasn't unusual, but this time he walked farther down the walkway than he usually did. When he came back inside, he seemed thoughtful, almost preoccupied, as if part of his mind stayed behind with whoever he had spoken to. Another day, she asked casually, "So, how soon will the investment show movement?" Jerry blinked a little longer than normal before answering. Not enough to alarm her, but enough for her to register the pause. "Oh, soon," he said, adjusting his shirt sleeve. "These things take a little time, but everything is moving the way it should." His answer wasn't odd. His tone wasn't off. But Elina had lived enough life to know when someone was choosing their words instead of simply speaking. She didn't confront him. She wasn't the type to jump into accusations without clarity. Her upbringing taught her patience, Catch the truth gently, not violently, as her aunties liked to say. Still, she began noticing more tiny shifts. Jerry started checking his phone more frequently. Not obsessively, just enough that it didn't match his usual habits. At dinner, he sometimes drifted off into thoughts he didn't voice. During their weekend errands, he'd squeeze her hand a little tighter, like reassurance mixed with distraction. None of it was large enough to point to a specific concern. But together, the small pieces painted a faint outline of something she couldn't yet define. It wasn't fear, wasn't jealousy. It was awareness, a slight, steady hum in her intuition that said, "Pay attention, Elina, something is moving beneath the surface." And yet, she still trusted him. She still believed they on the same team. She still believed the man she married was honest at his core. But trust is not blindness. And when trust meets subtle shifts, intuition quietly steps forward and waits. One evening, as she lay beside Jerry, watching him breathe steadily in sleep, whispered into the dark, "Lord, if there's something I need to see, show me." It wasn't a request born of suspicion. It was a request born of clarity, because for the first time since handing over that envelope, she felt a gentle tug inside her spirit. Something was about to reveal itself. She just didn't know how soon. The night everything shifted didn't begin with conflict. It began with quiet. A soft Oregon breeze slipped through the window slightly ajar, carrying the distant hush of the river. The apartment was dim except for the warm glow of the hallway light, and Elina had just finished her skincare routine, one of the small rituals that helped her wind down after a long day. Jerry said he was stepping into the living room to review something quickly, which wasn't unusual. He often looked over emails before bed, tying up loose ends so the morning felt cleaner. Elina didn't think much of it. She climbed into bed, pulled the blanket around her legs, and let her thoughts drift. But as minutes passed, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not frightening, just different. The kind of quiet that pulls your attention, even when you're not trying to focus. She turned toward the doorway, listening. At first, she heard nothing, but then she noticed Jerry's footsteps, slow, pacing steps, then a pause, then the faintest murmur of a voice. He was whispering, not in the relaxed, half-sleep voice he used when he talked to himself. This whisper carried weight, as if he didn't want the air itself to hear him. Elina sat up slightly, her instincts sharpening. Growing up, she had lived in a household where late-night movements meant something, where whispers behind doors held stories, confessions, or plans. Her grandmother often told her, "If your spirit shifts at night, don't ignore it. That's when truth walks the hallways." Tonight, truth was walking Jerry's. But she didn't leave the bedroom immediately. Instead, she listened more closely, giving herself time to determine whether she was misreading the situation. She didn't believe in snooping by default. She believed in paying attention. And then she heard it. A clear sentence carried through the quiet. She can't know yet. The words struck her chest like a quick, unexpected push. Her breath stilled. Her heart tightened. Her mind sharpened instantly. She didn't hear anger in Jerry's voice. She didn't hear guilt. She heard conflict, deep, tense conflict, as if he was caught between obligation and fear. Another pause. More whispering. Then, not until everything is in place. That was enough. Elina swung her legs out of bed and moved quietly toward the bedroom door, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. She wasn't being sneaky. She was being careful. Careful not to interrupt something without understanding it. Careful not to jump to conclusions. Careful to gather truth the way a wise woman does. Fully, intentionally, without haste. As she approached the hallway, she could see the faint outline of Jerry in the living room. His back was turned, one hand pressed to his forehead, the other holding his phone close to his mouth. He looked troubled, deeply. She leaned slightly against the wall, staying out of sight, but close enough to catch the tone of his voice. Not the words. Those were too soft now. But the tone. And that tone wasn't casual, wasn't businesslike, wasn't calm, was careful, measured, controlled. She swallowed slowly. Her intuition didn't scream. It didn't jump to conclusions. It simply stood at the center of her being and whispered, "Pay attention." When Jerry finally ended the call, he lingered in the same spot, shoulders raised, breath uneven. Elina stepped back from the hallway before he turned around. She didn't want him to see, standing there. Not yet. She returned to bed with steady movements, pulled the blanket over her legs again, and kept her breathing soft and natural, as if she had never risen. A moment later, she heard Jerry returning down the hallway. He paused in the doorway, watching her. She felt his gaze even with her eyes closed, the way a person watches something fragile, hoping it hasn't cracked. He exhaled slowly, then slipped into bed beside her. But Elina didn't sleep. She lay still, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, steady but slightly off from its usual pattern. She memorized the tension in his muscles, the way he shifted once, then twice, as if wrestling thoughts that refused to rest. In the darkness, she whispered to herself inside her own mind, "There it is. Something is happening. Not infidelity, not abandonment, not betrayal in the usual sense. Something deeper, something held behind walls she did not know existed." She didn't panic. She didn't accuse. She didn't move. Instead, she let her intuition step forward and take its rightful place. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would start paying closer attention to the quiet details. Because tonight proved one thing. There was more to her husband's world than he had ever allowed her to see. And soon she would learn exactly how far that world stretched. The next morning began like any other, but the energy in the apartment shifted the moment Elina noticed something on the dining table. Jerry's laptop. He never left it behind. Not at home. Not in the car. Not even on short trips. His laptop was practically an extension of him. Always in his bag. Always secured. Always within reach. Seeing it sitting there unattended felt out of place. Almost like a door had been left cracked open by accident. Elina paused in the middle of the kitchen, drying her hands slowly with a towel. She stared at the laptop, waiting for a logical explanation to surface. Maybe he was running late. Maybe he forgot it in a hurry. Maybe he planned to come back for it. But the more she stared, the more she felt that same tug in her spirit from the night before. She walked toward the table, her steps measured. She didn't intend to snoop, but she couldn't ignore something that stood out this clearly. When she reached the laptop, she hovered her hand above it, hesitating for a long moment. If she opened it, nothing would ever be the same. But if she walked away, she would be choosing to stay blind. Her grandmother's voice echoed again in her mind. If truth knocks, baby, don't leave the door closed. She tapped the space bar. The screen lit up instantly. No password, no barrier, no warning. Her breath caught. Jerry had always been cautious with digital security. For his laptop to open this freely meant either he forgot to lock it or something had distracted him enough to break his usual habits. The desktop appeared neatly arranged, just like Jerry's personality. Folders labeled with dates, projects, and financial records lined the screen. But one folder stood out from everything else. It wasn't labeled with a date. It wasn't labeled with a project name. It wasn't labeled with anything business-related. It read, Second Life. The name alone stopped her cold. Not because she expected scandal, but because the phrase carried weight. Weight that didn't belong in a marriage built on openness. Her pulse quickened. She clicked the folder. Inside were multiple files, but one immediately drew her eyes. The $52,000 project. The title struck her like a sudden drop in temperature. Her hands stiffened on the trackpad as she opened the document. Rows of numbers appeared. A spreadsheet organized with Jerry's usual precision. But the destination of her money was nothing like what he described. The $52,000 hadn't been placed into a traditional investment, nor into any financial instrument she recognized. The funds had been routed to something labeled Facility Maintenance. Location 9. Facility? Location 9? Elina leaned closer, reading the line 3 more times to ensure she wasn't misunderstanding. The amount matched her money exactly, down to the last dollar. Her heart thudded harder with each passing second. Location 9? Why multiple locations? Why a facility? Shock rippled through her chest, followed by rising confusion. And beneath both emotions, a small but undeniable streak of fear began to form. She scrolled further down the spreadsheet. Additional expenses appeared. Coded narratives, maintenance charges, supply orders, security upgrades. None of it aligned with any investment strategy she had ever heard of. None of it matched Jerry's explanation. She swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. This wasn't a financial move. This wasn't a harmless oversight. This was deeper. Her breathing grew shallow as realization washed over her. Jerry had used her money for something entirely unknown, something he never even hinted at. Shock tightened her chest. Confusion clouded her thoughts. Fear whispered questions she wasn't ready to answer. What was this place? Why was her money involved? What else was hiding inside that folder? She stared at the screen, frozen between the urge to close the laptop and the need to uncover more. Then she clicked on the next file. Whatever she found next would change everything. The moment Elina clicked the next file, the screen shifted into a layout she'd never seen on Jerry's laptop before. It wasn't one of his typical spreadsheets or neatly compiled reports. This file contained attachments, images, notes, and links embedded into a single page. Her heart thudded as she opened the first attachment. A photograph appeared. It showed a modern, isolated building surrounded by thick Oregon greenery. No signage, no street name, no identifying markers. Just a structure that looked intentional, yet hidden, as if it existed for purpose rather than publicity. Inside the building were people, faces blurred but clearly present. Some sat at long tables with notebooks. Others appeared in small groups, speaking to facilitators. Nothing about the scene looked chaotic or criminal. If anything, it resembled a controlled learning environment. Still, a question pressed into her mind. Why had Jerry never mentioned this place? She clicked the next photo, and this time, the breath left her body. Jerry was in the frame. He stood at the front of a room, facing a group of people who listened attentively. His posture was firm, steady, almost authoritative. He wasn't in his usual button-ups and slacks. He wore simple clothing, jeans and a shirt, as if he intentionally stripped away anything that hinted at wealth. His expression wasn't the calm, gentle one he saved for her. Here, he looked focused, almost burdened, but in a purposeful way. Like this was a side of him that lived in silence. Out of reach, out of sight. Elina felt the air around her shift. She clicked another image. This one showed a row of private rooms, each with a small desk, a lamp, and a bed. Not lavish, not cold, but practical. Designed for safety, not comfort. She clicked another. This time the screen displayed a common area where individuals seemed to be rebuilding routines, writing, studying, practicing tasks with quiet dedication. Her fingers trembled slightly. This wasn't a corporation. This wasn't a business venture. This wasn't leisure. It was something else entirely. She returned to the main file and opened a section labeled Confidential Journals, Internal Use Only. Her chest tightened. Jerry kept journals. Confidential journals? She clicked the first entry. A date appeared, followed by his handwriting converted into typed text. I want to tell Elina everything, but timing matters. She deserves transparency, but the board won't allow open disclosure until Phase 3 is secured. If she knew the full scope, she might see me differently. Elina's breath hitched. He had written her name. He had written about fear, not of danger, but of losing her trust. He had written about secrecy, not as deception, but as obligation. Still, obligation didn't make the impact any softer. Her eyes skimmed to the next paragraph. The $52,000 has to go to the expansion fund. Without it, Location 9 won't be ready. These people need safety. They need structure. They need a place to rebuild. Her hand pressed against her chest. The expansion fund. Location 9. Safety. The terms connected, but not enough to form a full picture. She scrolled to the end of the journal entry, where one final line sat alone. Once everything is in place, I'll tell her. I have to. She closed the journal file with shaking fingers. Her emotions didn't explode. They tightened quietly, the way they do when a truth begins to take shape but hasn't revealed itself fully. The next item on the list grabbed her attention. Master File. Program Overview. She clicked it. The screen went black for a moment, then loaded a clean, structured interface, unlike anything she'd seen before. There was a title at the top. The Truth House Program. Established 2010. Her breath stilled. Underneath the title, a mission statement appeared: to provide confidential support, education, and structured rebuilding for individuals affected by injustice, corporate abuse, or targeted financial destruction. All identities remain protected. All founders operate under anonymity until full authorization is achieved. Her eyes widened. This wasn't a secret empire. This wasn't illegal activity. This wasn't betrayal in the way she feared. It was something bigger, a hidden world designed to protect people whose lives had been damaged by forces beyond their control. Her gaze drifted lower to a section labeled Security Rules. Founder identity must remain concealed. Family members cannot be informed until clearance is granted. All funding allocations are classified until reviewed by the board. Her throat tightened. Jerry hadn't lied because he didn't care. He lied because he believed he wasn't allowed to tell her. Elina sat back, absorbing each line slowly. She didn't know whether to feel relief or heartbreak. Relief that he wasn't involved in something harmful. Heartbreak that he had built an entire world without telling her, a world that required her money yet excluded her truth. She stared at the screen, the weight of everything settling around her. Her husband was living two versions of himself, and she had only met one of them. Elina's eyes were still fixed on the screen when she heard the faintest sound, the soft metallic click of a key entering the front door. Her breath froze. Jerry wasn't supposed to be home yet. For a split second, her body reacted, before her mind caught up. She slammed the laptop shut, the sound sharper than she intended. The force of it echoed across the dining room, making her flinch. She pushed the laptop slightly away from her, hands trembling, trying to erase any sign of what she had seen. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she straightened her posture and moved toward the nearest vase on the counter. She pretended to fuss with the flowers, adjusting stems that didn't need adjusting, her back toward the door to disguise the tension tightening every muscle. The front door opened, and Jerry stepped inside. "Elina?" His voice carried a warm tone, but layered beneath it was something unsettled, something that hinted he wasn't walking into an ordinary afternoon. She inhaled through her nose, controlling her breath the way she had learned to do whenever life demanded steady composure. With deliberate calm, she turned around, offering him a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're home early," she said lightly. Jerry set his keys on the table, though his gaze seemed to scan the room more carefully than usual. First the counter, then her face, then the dining table where the laptop sat, now closed and motionless. "Yeah," he replied. "Meeting finished ahead of schedule." His voice was natural enough, but his eyes lingered too long on her, as if he was searching for something unspoken. "What are you up to?" he asked, a slight curve in his tone, casual, yet probing. Elina lifted one more flower in the vase and set it down gently. "Just tidying." Jerry took a few small steps forward, not rushed, not suspicious, but intentional. He studied her face for a second longer. "You okay?" "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. But inside, her emotions were shifting rapidly, swirling in shades of shock, betrayal, curiosity, fear, and a strange sense of clarity she didn't fully recognize yet. Everything she had discovered on that laptop still pressed against her mind, but her expression remained composed. Jerry slipped off his jacket, draping it over the back of a chair. The silence between them was thin, stretched, charged. Not loud, but undeniable. Then his gaze drifted, almost unconsciously, toward the laptop. Elina saw the moment his expression changed. Barely, subtly, but clearly. His shoulders tightened. His jaw shifted the slightest bit, and something flickered across his eyes. Something caught between caution and concern. He looked back at her abruptly. "Elina," she lifted her chin a little, her exterior controlled, even as her heart beat harder. "Yes?" Jerry's breath left him slowly, as if he had been holding it since he walked through the door. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he only made when he was preparing to reveal something heavy. "We need to talk tonight," he said, quietly. The words settled in the room like a stone hitting water. Soft impact, deep ripple. Tonight. Not later. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Elina felt her stomach tighten, but she didn't flinch. "Okay," she replied simply. Jerry studied her again, his eyes searching, analyzing, almost bracing. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The air felt still, but not empty. It carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. He eventually turned toward the hallway. "I'm going to change," he murmured. Elina nodded. As soon as he disappeared down the corridor, she released the breath she didn't realize she was holding. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, grounding herself. Tonight? That single word told her everything she needed to know. Jerry wasn't just carrying stress. He wasn't just hiding minor secrets. Whatever he was involved in had reached a point where silence was no longer sustainable. She looked at the laptop again, its closed lid reflecting a faint glimmer of light. Inside that device lived answers she was not supposed to see, answers Jerry had been protecting for reasons she still didn't understand. But now the truth was coming to her doorstep, whether she was ready or not. The tension didn't overwhelm her. It settled in her bones like preparation. The kind of preparation a woman feels when instinct tells her a turning point is ahead. Something was about to break open, and this time Jerry would be the one who had to speak. Night settled over the apartment with an unusual stillness, the kind of quiet that pressed against the walls as if waiting for something to break open. After dinner, after dishes, after carefully measured small talk, Jerry finally stepped into the living room and rubbed his palms together as though preparing himself for something he'd avoided too long. "Elina," he said gently, "sit with me." She approached slowly, her posture composed but alert. She took a seat across from him, not out of distance, but because she knew tonight required clarity, and clarity was easier from where she could see his full expression. Jerry inhaled slowly, then exhaled, as if releasing a weight he'd been carrying for years. "There's a part of my life you've never seen," he began, "a part I never intended to hide from you forever, but one I wasn't allowed to share until certain things were stable." Elina didn't interrupt. Her eyes remained steady on him, giving him room to speak while protecting her own heart. He looked down at his hands before beginning again. "When I was younger, before Oregon, before any of the wealth, before I knew what responsibility truly meant, my family went through something devastating." His voice thinned slightly, not from weakness, but from memory. He swallowed. "My father was brilliant, innovative, the kind of man whose ideas could change entire industries. But his integrity made him enemies, people with enough power and resources to destroy reputations if it protected their interests." Elina leaned forward slightly. Jerry continued, "They targeted him. False accusations, lawsuits designed to drain him. They attacked the business he built from nothing. At first, he survived every blow, but the pressure, it consumed him." His voice cracked just enough to reveal the wound beneath. "He died when I was still young. A heart attack brought on by stress that should have never been placed on him." Elina's chest tightened. She didn't speak, but her expression held compassion, the kind that reaches across silence. Jerry's gaze drifted toward the window, as if seeing years ago instead of the present. "My mother moved us from place to place, trying to escape the fallout, trying to protect me from becoming another casualty of someone else's greed. That was when I learned what injustice looked like. Not in theory, but in real time. He paused, gathering himself. When I became an adult and finally had resources, connections, and influence, I made a promise to myself that no one who suffered under unfair systems would ever be left alone the way my father was. Elina nodded slowly. Truth House? Jerry's eyes softened. Yes. Truth House. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. It wasn't created for profit. It wasn't built for recognition. It was built so people who were targeted, people whose lives were torn apart, could rebuild somewhere safe, not publicly, not where their enemies could find them. Quietly, securely, a beat passed. Everything about it had to remain private. Identities, locations, founders, even funding sources. If any of it leaked, clients could be placed in danger. The board insisted that every founder protect their connections, including family. Elina's breath steadied, but her eyes didn't waver. So you kept it from me? Because of them, she asked. Jerry shook his head, slowly. No, I kept it from you because of fear. His words were low, honest. Fear that if you knew the weight of what I carried, you'd feel pulled into a world you didn't choose. Fear that danger might reach you. Fear that the truth would make you look at me differently. He ran a hand through his hair. And when the emergency for location 9 came up, when the expansion had to happen fast, I made the wrong decision. I used your money without giving you the full truth. Not because I wanted control, but because I was desperate to meet the deadline, and I told myself I'd explain later. Elina inhaled, slow and deep. Jerry's eyes met hers. Vulnerable. Exposed. I never wanted to deceive you. But I did. And that's on me. A long moment stretched between them. Not empty. Full. Full of hurt, truth, and the first real bridge toward understanding. Jerry spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. My past shaped this mission, but hiding it from you, that was my failure. Elina didn't look away. She simply said, with quiet strength, then tell me all of it. Jerry's confession hung in the air like something fragile, something that could shatter if either of them moved too quickly. Elina sat still, absorbing everything he had released. His past, his father's pain, his vow, his fear, his secrecy. Every piece made sense on its own. Yet together, they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She folded her hands in her lap and took a slow breath, grounding herself before speaking. Jerry, she began softly, I hear the pain in what you told me. I hear the history. I hear the intention, and I'm not dismissing any of that. But we need to talk about what this means for us. Jerry nodded immediately, his expression open, but tense. Elina continued, Where I come from, honesty isn't optional. It's the foundation of everything. We tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We talk through issues loud, messy, emotional, but they come to light. Secrets don't get to sit in the middle of a relationship and grow roots. Jerry's eyes lowered, shame touching the edges of his posture. In my family, she said, privacy existed. Sure, but not between partners, not between people building a life together, and definitely not when decisions involve the kind of money I trusted you with. Her voice wasn't raised. She wasn't yelling, but the firmness in her tone held as much power as any outburst. Jerry rubbed his palms together, trying to steady himself. I know, and you're right. I handled it badly. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but the truth is, I was protecting myself from the possibility that you'd see me differently. Elina leaned forward, her eyes steady on his. You're the one who changed how I saw you, she said. Not because you're running Truth House. That's meaningful work, purposeful work, but because you took away my choice. You took away my right to decide what I could handle. He swallowed hard. I didn't want to put the weight of this world on your shoulders. And instead, she replied gently, you placed the weight of uncertainty there. Jerry exhaled sharply, guilt obvious. I should have trusted you. I'm your wife. That the promise you made. He looked up at her then, eyes glassy with remorse. I know, he whispered, and I'm sorry. Truly, I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for secrecy to sit between us. I thought I could get through the expansion, handle the board, and return to normal before you ever had to know. But that's not partnership, Elina said softly. Partnership means I stand with you in the work, not behind a curtain waiting for the truth to show itself. He nodded slowly, taking in every word. Elina paused and chose her next words with intention. There's something else you need to understand, she said. Our cultures approach communication differently. Where I'm from, silence is suspicious. Secrets make people nervous. We've seen too much in our communities to ignore when something feels off. Jerry listened deeply, absorbing the weight behind her statements. When you started acting differently, late calls, guarded behavior, pauses that didn't match your usual responses. I didn't assume the worst, but I did feel something shifting. And because you didn't talk to me, I was left filling in the blanks alone. He lowered his gaze again. I never wanted that. I know, she said softly. But it still happened. Silence stretched between them. But this silence wasn't empty. It was full of honesty. The kind that stings but heals. Jerry finally looked up again. Elina, what do you need from me to rebuild this? Tell me, and I'll do it. I don't want secrecy in our marriage. I don't want walls. I want you to feel safe with me again. Her eyes softened a little, but her voice remained steady. I need acknowledgement first, she said. Not excuses, not justifications. A full understanding of what your secrecy did to this relationship. Jerry nodded, eyes bright with emotion. Then let me say it plainly. I was wrong. I made decisions alone that should have involved you. I withheld truth that belonged to both of us. I allowed fear to guide me instead of partnership. His voice cracked, and I'm sorry. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. Elina felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness yet, but the beginning of space for it. She reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Jerry held on gently, as if afraid she might pull away. "This can be repaired," she added, "but only if everything comes into the open. No more half-truths. No more waiting for the right time. If we're going to fix this, I need everything." Jerry inhaled slowly, then nodded with quiet resolve. "Then everything is exactly what I'll give you." Jerry didn't move right away. After giving his apology, he sat still, holding Elina's hand, as though releasing it too soon might break the fragile honesty they had just rebuilt. But then something steadier settled into his eyes, a look that told Elina he had reached the part of the truth he feared the most. "There's more," he said quietly. Elina didn't flinch. "I figured there was." He let go of her hand only long enough to stand and walk toward the small drawer built into their dining table. It was a drawer that held simple things: coasters, spare keys, a booklet of restaurant menus, nothing that ever seemed worth attention. But tonight, Jerry opened it with purpose. He reached inside and pulled out a sealed envelope. Thick, heavy, official-looking, something that clearly wasn't meant to be misplaced or casually handled. When he returned to her, he held it with both hands, one on each side, as if passing something sacred. "Elina," he said softly, "this is the part of me almost no one knows. Not friends, not associates, not even the people who think they understand my background." She took the envelope, its weight surprising her. Her heart thudded once, slow and deep. "Open it," he murmured. She slid her thumb beneath the seal, carefully pulling it open. Inside were several documents, layered, stamped, and organized with the same meticulous precision she now recognized from his files. She lifted the first page, a formal identification document, and the name printed at the top was not Jerry. It read, Gerald M. Pierce. Her eyes widened just slightly. Not in panic, not in fear, but in recognition that the truth she expected was still far bigger than she imagined. "Gerald," she repeated softly. Jerry nodded. "My legal name." She lifted her gaze to him, giving him room to explain. "My family changed locations multiple times after my father passed," he said, "for our safety. Eventually, going by Jerry became part of keeping a lower profile. It helped me move quietly through business circles while building Truth House behind the scenes." Elina looked back down at the document. The next page carried a different weight entirely. A formal clearance certificate. Her eyes scanned it slowly. Federal level, restricted access, authorization tier. Far beyond anything she'd associated with corporate life. She drew in a steady breath. "You're cleared at this level." "Yes," he answered gently. long before Truth House became what it is today. My involvement in certain investigations connected to corporate exploitation earned me that clearance. It gave us protection and anonymity. Without it, programs like Truth House would never survive. Elina let the page lower into her lap, absorbing each layer of revelation. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" she asked. Jerry sat again, this time closer, not reaching for her immediately, but giving her a moment to process. "Because once you knew," he said, "you could never return to the version of life we had before. You'd be tied to this world. You'd carry this knowledge with you everywhere. And I didn't want to steal the simplicity you deserve." Elina's eyes softened, but remained focused. "But simplicity isn't truth," she said. He nodded. "And you're right," he replied. "I've spent so long protecting everyone around me that I forgot protecting you requires honesty, not distance." She looked through the envelope again, lifting another sheet, this one outlining the structure of Truth House. Founders: Gerald M. Pierce. Founder 1, additional founders unnamed. Elina stared at the bold lettering identifying him as Founder 1. "You built this," she whispered. Jerry nodded once. A quiet confirmation. "With a mission bigger than myself, but hiding parts of who I am from you. That was never the plan. It happened piece by piece. And before I realized it, the distance became a wall." Elina placed the documents back into the envelope slowly, making sure nothing bent or slipped out of order. Her voice softened. "Jerry or Gerald, I don't care what name you used. I care that you finally told me." He exhaled sharply, not in frustration, but in relief. "There's more for you to see, more for you to understand. But I will not reveal it in pieces anymore. From now on, if you ask, I answer." Elina studied him, the man she married, the man she loved, the man she was now discovering all over again. Not as Jerry the husband, but as Gerald the founder, the protector, the person carrying the weight of countless lives. She closed the envelope and held it against her lap. "This changes things," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something unspoken settled between them. A shift, a turning point, a truth, finally freed. But before either could continue, a thought crossed Elina's mind, sharp, sudden, lingering. If this was only the beginning of what he'd hidden, what came next might reshape their entire marriage. And that realization became the new cliffhanger resting between them. The morning after Jerry revealed his true identity, the apartment felt heavier than usual. Not tense, just weighted with everything they had spoken, everything they had unpacked, everything she needed to think through on her own. Elina woke before Jerry, a rare moment where she felt the need to step outside herself and breathe in space that wasn't crowded with emotion. She slipped on a light jacket, tied her scarf loosely, and stepped out into the cool Oregon morning. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just stood quietly on the walkway, watching the mist roll softly across the road. Her heart wasn't frantic. Her thoughts weren't jumbled. She simply needed clarity, not from Jerry, not from explanations, not from documents, but from within. So she began walking. Her steps were slow, steady, purposeful. The rhythm of her feet on the pavement connected with something grounded inside her. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. She let the air settle into her lungs, letting each breath remind her that she had a voice, direction, and power in her own life. As she walked, her thoughts shifted away from confusion and into understanding, not acceptance, not forgiveness. Understanding, she understood now why Jerry kept the secret. She understood the danger attached to Truth House. She understood the weight he carried as Gerald M. Pierce. But she also understood this. Understanding a person's reasons doesn't erase the impact of their choices. She stopped at a quiet spot near the river, a place she discovered months ago when she needed grounding. She removed her gloves, letting her fingertips graze the railing, slightly chilled by morning air. The sound of water moving beneath her steadied her heart in ways nothing else could. Closing her eyes, she whispered, almost instinctively, Lord, give me wisdom. Help my heart stay open, but help my voice stay firm. It wasn't a dramatic prayer. It wasn't filled with tears. It was steady, honest, and rooted in her upbringing, the same upbringing that taught her strength wasn't loud. It was intentional. She stayed at the railing for several minutes, letting calmness sink into her bones. When she finally turned back toward home, her decision was clear. Not emotional, not reactionary. Clear. When she stepped into the apartment, Jerry was sitting at the dining table. He looked up immediately, worry flickering across his face. Elina, you left early. I needed time, she replied calmly, hanging her jacket. I needed a moment. Think without pressure. Jerry nodded slowly. I understand. She walked closer, stopping directly across from him. There was no trembling in her voice, no hesitation, no emotional wobble. She stood in her full strength. Jerry, she began, if we're going to rebuild this marriage, there must be new terms, boundaries, transparency. Not in pieces. Fully. He straightened, listening with full attention. She continued, you can't protect me by hiding truth. You can't make decisions involving me without me. And you can't have a world I'm completely shut out from while still calling us partners. Jerry swallowed. You're right. Whatever you need, we'll do. I'm glad you said that, she replied, because I need something specific. He leaned in slightly. What is it? I want to see Truth House. Jerry froze. Elina didn't blink. Not an explanation, not another document. Not another description. I want to see the place where you used my money. I want to walk through the halls. I want to see what you've been protecting with my own eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Not in disagreement, but in realization that this was the next step he should have expected. Elina, That facility is heavily restricted. I contributed to it, she replied plainly. And I'm your wife. If we're rebuilding trust, I should be allowed to see the world you've been carrying alone. Jerry lowered his gaze for a moment, his throat tightening. When he finally spoke, the resistance wasn't in his tone, only concern. Okay, he whispered. I'll take you. She nodded once. Good. In that moment, the dynamic between them shifted. Not in imbalance, but in alignment. Elina's voice was no longer reacting to secrecy. It was shaping what came next. Jerry watched her with something between admiration and humility. She wasn't simply processing truth anymore. She was taking her place in it. Jerry didn't rush the next morning. He moved with deliberate calm, as if understanding that this wasn't just a visit to a facility. It was a turning point in their marriage. Elina dressed simply: jeans, a warm sweater, and a light coat. Not to impress, not to blend in, just to be present, aware, grounded. They drove in silence for the first several minutes, neither uncomfortable nor distant, simply absorbing the weight of what was ahead. The Oregon roads curved gently through tall evergreens, the morning light filtering through branches like a quiet reminder that clarity often comes after stillness. Elina watched the scenery pass by, her thoughts steady. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't angry. She felt something closer to readiness, a sense that she was finally stepping into a world Jerry had carried alone for far too long. After nearly an hour, Jerry turned onto a narrow road that branched away from the main highway. No signs marked the entrance. No visible indicators suggested anything beyond trees and open land. But Elina recognized the landscape from the photos she had seen on his laptop. You've been coming here for years, she said softly. Jerry's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Yes, she nodded. Nothing more needed to be said at that moment. The car rolled to a stop in front of the building. It looked exactly as the images had shown. Modern, discreet, clean, purposeful, not intimidating, not cold, but not casual either. It carried a presence that told her this place was meant for transformation, not attention. Jerry stepped out and walked around to open her door. She appreciated the gesture, though she didn't need help. As she stepped onto the gravel path, she took a slow inhale, letting the air settle inside her. Her eyes drifted over the structure, the simple lines, the wide windows, the clear but secure entrances. Nothing about it suggested secrecy in the dramatic sense. Instead, it seemed built to give people privacy, the kind that shelters rather than hides. Jerry motioned toward the door. Are you ready? She answered with a firm yes. Inside, the atmosphere was nothing like she had expected. It wasn't a cold institution or sterile facility. The lobby carried warmth, soft tones, comfortable seating, calming textures. People moved with quiet purpose. Staff members walked confidently, but not hurriedly, speaking softly to individuals who seemed engaged in their own rebuilding. Elina took it all in silently. They moved through the main corridor, passing rooms she had only seen as photographs before. In one room, a woman sat with a counselor, her expression steady as she worked through what looked like financial planning steps. In another room, a young man practiced interview responses with a mentor. Further down the hall, a group gathered around a table reviewing written plans, each participant leaning in with focus. No one here looked lost. No one here looked broken. They looked in transition, rebuilding from pieces that life had unfairly scattered. Jerry watched Elina carefully, letting her absorb the environment at her own pace. "These people," she whispered, "they've been through so much." Jerry nodded. Many lost everything due to systems designed to bury them. Truth House gives them a place to rebuild without fear of being targeted again. She stepped closer to a glass window overlooking a workshop room. Inside, individuals were learning skills, some writing, some repairing equipment, some reviewing legal documents with trained guides. "This isn't what I expected," she said truthfully. "What did you expect?" he asked gently. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But seeing this, I understand why it matters to you." Jerry exhaled softly, relief flickering across his face. They continued walking until they reached a room where he had been photographed standing before a group. He paused outside the doorway. "This is where I teach sessions," he said quietly. "Leadership, rebuilding mindset, legal awareness, anything that helps them stand again." Elina studied the space, the simple layout, the chairs arranged with intention, the whiteboard marked with notes that emphasized growth and clarity. Then she looked at Jerry. She saw something in his eyes she hadn't fully understood until this moment. A responsibility he couldn't shrug off. A mission rooted not in ego, but in memory. His father's story wasn't just a past burden. It was the blueprint for everything he built here. Elina softened just slightly. "You're carrying a lot," she said. Jerry met her gaze. "I should have carried it, you." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked into the room, letting her fingertips brush the back of one of the chairs. Everything in here felt purposeful, grounded, real. When she turned back to him, her voice held something new. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. "I see you differently now," she said. "Not because you hid this, but because you built it." Jerry stepped closer, careful not to break whatever fragile shift was happening between them. "Elina, having you see this means more than you know." She nodded slowly. "This place is important. I can see that now. But we still have work to do. And we will," he promised. This time, she believed him. The drive back from Truth House felt different than the drive there. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't filled with questions or unspoken tension. It carried something clearer, the beginning of understanding, the beginning of rebuilding. But understanding alone wasn't enough. Elina knew that. Jerry knew that. Once they reached the apartment and stepped inside, Jerry closed the door gently behind them. He turned toward her, his posture straight, his expression earnest. "Elina," he said quietly, "whatever you need next, say it. I'm ready." She removed her scarf and hung it neatly, then faced him with a calm he hadn't seen in days. "Good," she replied, "because there are things we need to settle, clearly and directly." Jerry nodded without hesitation. Elina walked toward the dining table and took a seat. Her posture wasn't defensive. It was intentional. The way someone sits when they're prepared to speak truthfully and receive truth in return. Jerry joined her, sitting across from her the same way he had the night. Everything began to unravel, except this time she was in control of the conversation. "First," she said evenly, "accountability." Jerry exhaled. "I'm listening. You used my savings without telling me," she said. "You kept information from me that directly impacted our partnership. You didn't trust me with your world, but you expected me to trust you with mine." The words weren't angry, just honest. Jerry's voice was soft. "You're right. Accountability," she repeated, "means repairing what your choice damaged, practically and emotionally." He nodded. "I agree." She continued, "Financially, that starts with the $52,000. You took it without full disclosure. And even though I see the value of Truth House, the way you handled that decision wasn't right." Jerry didn't attempt to justify anything. "You're absolutely right." Elina folded her hands. "I want it returned." Jerry reached into his jacket pocket without hesitation and placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. A receipt from a completed transfer. "I already did," he said, "with additional compensation. Triple, actually. I wanted the return to reflect both the financial loss and the breach of trust." Elina lifted the paper, scanned it quietly, then set it gently back on the table. She took a slow breath. "That's a start." Jerry held her gaze, absorbing the weight of her words. "But accountability isn't just financial," she continued. "You have to face the people you work with, the board, and tell them exactly what you did. Not because it's required, but because it's right. You hid important information from your wife because of a rule they put in place. They need to hear that secrecy nearly cost you your marriage." Jerry nodded deeply, almost gratefully. "I'll speak with them. All of them. They need to know that the system we created can't keep spouses in the dark anymore." "Good," she replied, "because honesty can't be conditional." He lowered his head in acknowledgement. "I understand." A long, quiet moment stretched between them, not tense, but reflective. Then Jerry stood slowly. "There's no reason to wait. I'll talk to them today." Elina blinked, surprised by the immediacy. "Today?" "Yes." He stepped closer. "If repairing this marriage requires accountability, I won't delay it another hour." She studied him, the firmness in his tone, the humility in his eyes, the sincerity in his resolve. "Okay," she said softly. "Go." Jerry nodded once, grabbed his keys, and stepped out with a conviction she hadn't seen in him before. The apartment door closed gently. Elina stood still for a moment, absorbing the quiet left behind. And for the first time since discovering the truth, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, but the beginning of restored stability. Hours later, Jerry returned. He entered quietly, removed his jacket, and approached her where she sat on the couch. "It's done," he said. "I told them everything, including how secrecy damaged us. They agreed to revise internal protocols. No founder should keep something this significant from their spouse again." Elina inhaled slowly, letting the news settle. "And how do you feel?" she asked. Jerry sat beside her. "Like I finally stepped out of a shadow I put myself in." She nodded thoughtfully. Their hands brushed lightly, not clasping fully yet, but meeting halfway, as if testing new ground. "Jerry," she said softly, "this doesn't instantly fix everything, but it does show me something important." He looked at her, hopeful. "It shows me you're willing to rebuild," she continued. "Not with promises, but with action." Jerry's voice softened. "I am completely—" Their hands finally intertwined. Not tightly, not desperately, but with quiet intention. A beginning, not old beginning. A new one, the kind built on truth, accountability, and the hard work of choosing each other again. The weeks following Jerry's meeting with the board marked the true beginning of something Elina never expected. Not a repair, but a reconstruction. The kind where two people don't try to go back to what they were, but deliberately build something steadier, healthier, and more honest than before. Jerry kept his word. Every day he made tangible changes, not grand gestures meant to impress her, but quiet, consistent behaviors that showed he was choosing her, choosing them with intention. The first change was transparency. For years, Jerry had walked through life carrying entire worlds on his shoulders, without letting anyone see the weight. But now he spoke openly. He shared where he was going, what meetings he had, what decisions needed to be made at Truth House, and why those decisions mattered. It wasn't about giving her a report. It was about letting her into spaces he had once kept guarded. One evening, as they sat on the couch with tea warming their hands, Jerry said softly, "I didn't realize how alone I'd made myself until I let you in. Thank you for being patient with me." Elina looked at him, her expression gentle but grounded. "Marriage isn't about patience alone, Jerry. It's about honesty. I can walk through anything with you, but I cannot walk blind." He nodded, accepting her words without defensiveness. That was another change. He wasn't explaining himself as often. He was listening more, responding more thoughtfully, absorbing instead of reacting. Elina also contributed in ways that surprised even her. For so long she had associated secrecy with betrayal because of things she'd seen growing up, relatives hiding problems until they exploded, friends carrying emotional bruises from unspoken conflicts. Now she saw something new. Secrecy could also come from fear, from protection, from unresolved wounds a person didn't know how to open. Understanding didn't erase the hurt, but it helped her navigate it. She began creating intentional spaces for communication. After dinner, they'd sit together for 15 minutes, no phones, no distractions, and speak about whatever was on their minds. Some evenings, they laughed. Other times, they sat quietly. Sometimes she asked questions he had never been ready to answer until now. One night she said, "Jerry, when you look at your life, the version only you've carried, what part of it scared you the most to share with me?" Jerry took a breath, rubbed his hands together, and answered honestly, "The part where I still feel like that boy who couldn't save his father. I thought if you saw the cracks in me, you might love me less." Elina reached over, tracing her thumb across his knuckles. Vulnerability doesn't make you smaller. It makes room for connection. And you're not alone in your healing. Their emotional intimacy grew from these small moments, steady, warm, and rooted in truth rather than performance. They also worked on rebuilding routines together. Morning coffee became a shared ritual. Jerry cooked breakfast twice a week, which resulted in a lot of scrambled eggs resembling modern art. But it made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed since the beginning of their marriage. Elina found herself softening again, not forgetting the past, but recognizing the growth happening in front of her. Another evening, Jerry came home from a long day and said, "Today I corrected a policy that used to keep founders isolated. It felt good, Elina. It felt like I was finally aligning my work with the kind of marriage I want." She smiled. "And what kind of marriage is that?" "One where I'm not just a protector," he replied, "but a partner. One where you know every part of the man you married." The more Jerry opened himself, the more Elina felt her heart steady. She wasn't naive. Healing didn't come instantly, but she felt the shift. She saw his effort, his humility, his desire to rebuild with integrity. She also found herself contributing in ways she hadn't before, offering perspectives about people, relationships, and cultural nuance, insights Jerry valued deeply. He often said, "You see people in a way I never learned to." I admire that. Their marriage slowly transitioned from cautious steps to confident movement. Small dates, long walks, quiet prayers together, each act created new emotional soil for them to grow in. For the first time since discovering the folder labeled Second Life, Elina felt grounded again. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally honest. Their partnership wasn't fully restored yet, but it was alive, breathing, and moving in the right direction together. J. Airy had always carried Truth House like a responsibility stitched into his bones. Even when he hid it, even when the secrecy created distance between them, the mission itself came from a sincere place inside him. Now that everything stood in the open, something new began to form. A space where Elina wasn't observing from the outside, but slowly being welcomed to participate beside him. It began one evening while they were cleaning up after dinner. Jerry was rinsing dishes, something he used to rush through but now treated as a moment of shared time, and Elina was wiping the counter. The kitchen lighting cast a warm glow, making the atmosphere feel calm and intentional. Jerry cleared his throat lightly. "Elina, can I ask you something important?" She set the towel down and looked at him. "Of course." He took a few seconds, carefully choosing his words. "I want you to be part of Truth House. Not just visiting, not just observing. I want you involved, truly involved." Elina blinked, caught slightly off guard. "Involved? How?" Jerry turned off the faucet and dried his hands, moving closer so she could see the sincerity in his expression. "Elina, you have something I don't, something Truth House desperately needs. You have a way of connecting with people quickly, authentically. You understand emotion, family, community, culture in ways that bring comfort to people who feel lost. I've seen it. You walk into a room and people soften." She smiled faintly. "Jerry, that's kind. But this is your world, a serious one. You built it long before we met." He shook his head gently. "And maybe that's the problem. I built it with structure, funding, systems, and logic, but not enough heart. You bring balance. Truth House isn't just a facility. It's a place where people rebuild themselves. They need structure, yes, but they also need warmth, reassurance, understanding. You carry all of that naturally." Elina inhaled slowly, absorbing his words. A part of her felt deeply honored. Another part felt cautious. "Jerry, are you asking because you feel obligated, or because you genuinely see a role for me?" She asked calmly. He reached for her hands. "Because I genuinely see you as part of this mission. When you walked through that facility, you saw things even I overlooked. The way you spoke to the woman in the art room, she hasn't opened up like that in months. And the young man studying financial literacy, he responded to you immediately. You connected with them without forcing anything." Elina remembered the faces she saw, the quiet hope, the silent battles. She remembered the way they looked at Jerry with gratitude and caution at the same time, and she remembered how quickly that caution faded when she walked in, offering a smile that felt familiar to people who had been hurt. "Truth House could be stronger with you on the inside," Jerry added, "not just as my wife, but as someone helping shape the healing process." She looked down for a moment, letting her thoughts settle. She was not a woman who made decisions lightly. Her upbringing taught her that calling, purpose, and responsibility went hand in hand. If she stepped into something, she wanted to commit fully. "Tell me what that role would look like," she said finally. Jerry's face brightened, not with excitement, but with relief. "Anything aligned with your strengths. You could lead cultural connection workshops, help design support programs, bring your emotional insight into client interactions. You could sit in on planning meetings with me, or observe before choosing where you fit. I don't want to assign you a box. I want to build space around your gifts." Elina bit her lower lip thoughtfully. "You really believe I can contribute something meaningful?" "Absolutely," he whispered. Truth House needs soul. You have that. A long, quiet moment followed, the kind where a decision begins forming itself inside the heart before the mind fully recognizes it. She looked up at him, her eyes steady. All right, she said softly. I'll join you. But we move step by step. I want to understand the work, understand the people, understand the system. I won't just jump in blindly. Jerry nodded with a gentle smile. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Over the next week, Elina began visiting Truth House regularly. She shadowed Jerry in meetings, observed counseling sessions, sat with clients during breaks, and asked thoughtful questions the team hadn't considered before. One counselor whispered to Jerry, "She sees people deeply. This is good for us." Jerry simply smiled. I know. Slowly, a dynamic began forming. His structure paired with her heart, his strategic mind paired with her intuitive sense of human connection. They weren't just a married couple navigating healing anymore. They were becoming a team, a real one. One afternoon, after a full day at the facility, Elina looked at Jerry and said, quietly, I think, I'm starting to see why this meant so much to you. He looked at her with warmth. And now it means something to us. Their partnership, once fractured, now started feeling purposeful. Their strengths weren't competing. They were forming something stronger. This was no longer Jerry's mission alone. It was becoming their mission. The shift in their marriage wasn't loud. It didn't happen with dramatic gestures or sudden transformations. It grew the way dawn creeps across a quiet sky, slowly, steadily, bringing light without demanding attention. As weeks passed, Elina and Jerry found themselves moving in a rhythm that felt new, yet comforting, a rhythm that reflected healing, honesty, and purpose. Their mornings looked different now. Instead of silent routines interrupted only by the sound of coffee brewing, they shared thoughts before starting their day. Jerry often asked, "How's your heart this morning?" And Elina would answer honestly, even when the truth required vulnerability. Elina returned the question, giving Jerry permission to speak freely, something he had never experienced before. Their evenings softened too. Some nights were filled with conversation, others with peaceful quiet, the kind couples share when simply being together feels enough. The weight that once hung between them, secrecy, hesitation, uncertainty, had lifted. In its place was deeper understanding. But the true sign of a new beginning came at Truth House itself. The staff quickly noticed how naturally Elina's presence elevated the environment. She brought joy into serious rooms, grounding into heavy conversations, and cultural perspective that enriched every interaction. She didn't try to replace anything. She simply added what was missing. One afternoon, as she sat with a few clients in the common area, Jerry watched her from a distance. It wasn't admiration driven by romance alone. It was admiration shaped by respect. The kind a man feels when he sees his partner walking confidently in purpose. A client approached him quietly and said, "She makes the place feel warm." "You chose well," Jerry smiled. "I agree." Later that evening, after a long day of meetings and thoughtful discussions, Jerry and Elina walked out of the facility together. The Oregon air carried a soft chill, the kind that made people lean closer to the ones they loved. "Jerry," Elina said, adjusting her coat, "I didn't realize how much this work needed heart. Not sympathy, but heart. People crave understanding more than they crave solutions." He nodded. "And that's what you bring. Understanding. Truth House always had structure, but you've given it connection." She smiled faintly. "And you've given me perspective. Discipline, systems, and the importance of intentional planning. Together, I think we're dangerous in the best way." Jerry laughed gently. A perfect balance. Their marriage wasn't just healing. It was expanding into purpose, mission, and partnership. 2 weeks later, Jerry gathered the Truth House leadership team for a special meeting. Elina didn't know why he insisted she attend, but she sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. Jerry stood and cleared his throat. "I want to officially introduce someone who has transformed not only my life, but the way I see this mission." Elina blinked, surprised. He hadn't told her he planned this. He continued, "She has brought clarity, empathy, cultural understanding, emotional intelligence, and strength into a space that desperately needed it. Truth House is better because she is here, and moving forward, she will be part of our leadership circle." Every head turned toward Elina. A few smiled warmly. Some nodded in agreement. Elina's eyes widened. "Jerry, I didn't expect." He gently squeezed her hand. "This isn't about expectation. It's acknowledgement. You belong here." Emotion filled her eyes. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, but deep. Purpose had a way of grounding a person, and in that moment, she felt grounded. Later that night, back at home, they sat together on the couch. "This still feels surreal," she said softly. "Why?" he asked. "Because a few months ago, I was just trying to understand why my husband was acting strange," she answered. "And now we're leading something meaningful together." Jerry nodded. "It's because we chose honesty, even when it was uncomfortable." Elina leaned her head on his shoulder. "Trust isn't something you rebuild with words. It's something you rebuild with consistency. You've shown that." He wrapped his arm around her gently. "And you've shown me what true partnership looks like." Silence settled. Warm, intentional, united. After a moment, Elina lifted her head and spoke with the tone she used when dropping wisdom. "You know, Jerry, healing isn't about forgetting the wound. It's about moving forward stronger because of what it taught you. That's what we're doing. That's what Truth House is doing. That's this marriage is doing." Jerry smiled softly. "A new beginning." She nodded. "A purposeful one. Sometimes life brings you into storms you never asked for. Sometimes the people you trust make mistakes that shake the ground beneath your feet. But when honesty steps in, when accountability is embraced, When two people choose growth over pride, healing becomes possible. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's rebuilding, brick by brick, and choosing to walk forward with clarity, honesty, and purpose. Thank you for watching this story here on Mr. Michael's Stories Hub. If this journey touched your heart or taught you something about trust, healing, or partnership, please take a moment to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Your voice truly helps this channel grow. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another powerful story.